Okay.
No.
We'll show how to solve both of them kind of simultaneously. So first, let's define the problems. So what is atomic broadcast? This green mint thing is a synchronous network, or some network, and there are transactions which are going into the network, and what we want to achieve is linear ordering of all of the transactions. So this is essentially the core problem of blockchain. There are many transactions coming at different paces to different nodes, and we want to come into consensus about the common ordering.
Is the output generated in order?
Is the output generated?
Yes, can I at some point learn that this order, that in this case, there will be nothing between transaction B and transaction A?
Yes, that's very important. This is called finality. So whenever you see that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, but you can be certain that nothing will jump in between 3 and 4. So yes, properties. That's actually the first property. So there are no rollbacks. There is immutability property. That's important. And the other property is censorship, which means that if someone has input the transaction into the system, but eventually it will end up in the linear order.
By no rollback, you mean it's finalized everything?
Yes, that's the same as finality condition. And the second problem is randomness beacon. So again, you have the network of some nodes, and what we want to achieve are the nodes outputting random bits in rounds. So in every round, you want them to output some string of random bits, say 8 bits. And what you want to achieve here is that distributions of these random bits are totally uniform, so it's impossible to bias the randomness. They are totally unpredictable before output, and but the output is guaranteed, meaning that you keep leibniz property. So next, let's formalize the model. What is this?
You probably want that it might be obvious that the output is public and immutable in the randomness. Is this the case?
Yes, this is the case. So yes. No further comments. So now let's formalize it a bit more. What is this big green thing? This set of n nodes with a public key infrastructure. So they all know each other public keys, and they have authenticated point-to-point channels. But the trick here is that the message delays can be arbitrarily large. So whenever one node sends a message to another node, it can take arbitrarily long to reach the other node. What's even worse, adversary can control the delays. So
the nodes also know how many of them are there, or do they know?
Yes, they know how many of them are there, and they have channels to each other. So of course, yeah, that's a consequence. And well, model of the internet, so to speak. And now there is an adversary in the system. So certain nodes are controlled by a computationally bounded adversary who can, besides that, deviate from the protocol in any possible way. And he can control at most n over 3 nodes. And there are old results showing that if an adversary controls more, then actually nothing can be done, neither consensus nor random beacon. Okay, so some previous work. When it comes to atomic broadcast, the first asynchronous consensus was in '87, and basically they came to. And I'm not going to speak too much about this all stream of works. The state of the art before our protocol was Honey Badger BFT from 2016. And it was the first one which achieved optimal communication complexity per transaction, meaning that each node downloaded each transaction roughly only once. But it suffered from logarithmic latency, and it required a trusted dealer before the protocol started, which is a very, very unwanted assumption, especially in blockchain sphere. I mean, you definitely do not want to rely on trusted dealers. Yes, or How do we measure time?
Yes.
This is a very tricky question. So the concept is called asynchronous round. I think we can talk later offline about it, but it's a bit complex definition. But roughly, I mean, it's very hard to speak about rounds when everything is asynchronous. But roughly, you can think that in every round, every node should be allowed to do something at least once.
Okay. My question was more about what is the assumption of the incoming transaction rate?
Okay. So the assumption is that it's pretty huge. I don't remember right now, but I think it's n square log n per round, I think.
Where n is the number
of nodes, yes. And if it's lower, then the communication complexity unfortunately grows. And we have very similar assumption regarding the influx of transactions. So what we do, we keep the constant communication complexity, we get constant latency, and we get rid of the trusted dealer assumption.
Question. So usually communication complexity is measured in number of messages exchanged.
Right? Yes, here we are counting it per node. So the question is how many messages per transaction per node do you need to have?
Okay. So it's a linear per round.
Yes, yes. Yes, so globally you can that is linear. And the second thing is randomness beacon.
You can have that getting rid of trusted dealer is very important.
I already did actually. So when it comes to random beacons, in general, there are two ways of implementing them. First one is through it's verifiable secretary. Yeah, it's verifiable secretary. But usually this is not a very viable solution. I mean, the best one has communication complexity of n cubed for each query. So you need to do a setup, and then each time you want to get some string of random bits, you need to pay the price of n cubed, which is pretty high. And besides that, the normal way of achieving random beacons is through threshold signature. So you have n nodes, and then cumulatively construct a signature. And then if the signature was done on a random nonce, or some fresh nonce, then you can assume that this signature is basically fully random. So I'm going to speak a bit about this particular way a bit more, because this is also how we do it. But basically, before there was no way to set up the distributed generation for such signatures in an asynchronous way. So, but of course, there have been plenty of works on general DKG protocols. And what we do here is that we are fully asynchronous in both in the setup and during the query. And we have a constant amount of rounds and square communication complexity during the setup, and one round and linear communication complexity during each query. And
but the same is the complexity not per node, but the total, right?
Indeed. That's not my fault because
this is per node.
Mm.
Okay. It's per node. You need to collect these shelves, right?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, that's still per node. And interesting note is that there is a new preprint right now, which is doing very similar thing. So this is also another way of achieving threshold signature in asynchronous system, but it's got a bit worse setup. So there is a worse communication complexity and worse latency during the setup. The queries are the same though. And it's by Abraham et al., which is the same, which also improved over honey butter. So the other team was working basically on the very similar thing at the same time. So now a bit rough sketch of how we do achieve both of these things. So first, the core idea for both of these protocols is a communication history DAG. So some of you might have heard already about the DAG protocols. So there's like plenty of them in the whole blockchain sphere, but I'm gonna formalize it again, as it may differ a bit of what you've seen before. So let's assume we have 4 nodes in the network. So it's gonna proceed in the so-called rounds. And during each round, each node is expected to produce one block of data. We call it a unit. It's going to contain some transactions. And the important thing is that once a node produces a unit, it uses a protocol called reliable broadcast to broadcast the unit through a network. I think it's a protocol from '87, probably from work of Braha. And the important property here is that it either, if an honest node initiates it, then the block will initially be delivered to every honest node. And this basically gives some consistency on the data structure. So if someone creates a unit, then eventually it's going to spread through the whole network. And the important part is that in the next round, when nodes are producing the units, they are referencing all units. So each unit in the round 1 is referencing 2n/3 units from the previous round.
At least 2n/3.
Sorry?
At least.
At least 2n/3. It could be exact. So in each unit, there are some basic data, basically just this references, round number, who created it, and transactions, and signature. So the intuition behind it is that whenever you see such a unit with references to units before, that you can be certain that the node creating this unit was aware of the unit he is referencing. So that's why we call it communication history DAG. But basically, it's you can recover some part of the communication just looking at the structure, which is commonly built by the nodes. So the structure grows, yes, of course. Like if you have a unit here which is referencing this unit, which was referencing this unit, then yes, we do it in such a way that this is a transitive property. So
something like refuse to acknowledge a unit until you got all the units that is referenced.
If you get this unit and you don't have the parents, then you are not allowed to build upon.
So what I mean, if a Byzantine node sends such a unit, it might have a completely false history in it. Is this a problem somewhere? So how do you know the data is actually good?
So if there are signatures in the units, and if you get a unit which is referencing something which is false, then well, you don't know this unit, this false unit. So you will just have this. This will be unit which will be hanging forever. You will never actually use it. Like if it's referencing something which is false, then no one will build upon it. Okay, so the problem now, this is of course a partial order. That's already pretty good, but of course we want to make a total or linear order out of it. So that's a main problem here. And how do we it's a surprising slide. Okay, so the problem, one of the problems is availability of units. So it may happen that some unit was created, and yes, it eventually will reach everyone, but for now it reached me, and no one else have even heard about it. So like it's causing a problem with linear order. I may be wanting to actually put it in the order already, but of course no one else will do it. So the different nodes can have very different opinions about availability of units. So what we need to have is a consensus on availability of unit. So if I have a unit and I know that the whole network reached a consensus that this unit is already available, then I'm actually good to go in inputting into the linear order. So this reduction is not as trivial as I'm speaking now, but generally this is one of the there are many ways of reducing this binary consensus to the atomic broadcast. So for example, if we reach binary consensus on every unit, we may, for example, say that, okay, so at each level we are taking to the linear order only blocks which have consensus 1, and we do it lexicographically. That's a trivial way of doing linear order out of it. It's not optimal. It would have a logarithmic latency. To get it actually to the constant latency requires a slightly more involved trick, which I'm not going to discuss here. Yes?
I think I'm what we mean by consensus.
I mean that it's a value either 0 or 1, and which is shared among all the nodes. And if it's 1, it means that every honest node voted that this unit is available for him.
Okay, so this is an asymmetric thing. We can say 1 only if some threshold of us if some threshold of us has the initial value 1. We can say 0 in the essentially always, except that we need to have a way to say 1.
Yes, I could say so. So, for example, it can happen that legitimately constructed unit by honest node can have 0. It can happen.
Maybe it's good to say here that still we guarantee that the majority of units in every round will be decided 1. So this is something we can guarantee.
Yes, and there is also an underlying model of inputting transactions into the units. As I said before, we really want to have censorship resistance. So, like, we need to have also a tricky model of inputting transactions into units, so it does not happen that some transaction has been in the unit with 0 and it just lost forever. But this is also like, this is basically another model which is built upon this consensus. Okay, so the binary consensus. Well, the idea we are using is called virtual voting, and it's from pretty old, from the last century. And basically,
They had some good ideas back then.
Some ideas.
yeah, and the idea is that like usually, if you would like to run a consensus on something, you would need to do a lot of communication between the nodes. But what you can do if you have such a clever structure as this communication DAG, you can just look at the unit which is constructed by someone, and you can basically simulate what would he say about availability of the units below. So if it's referencing a unit, then of course he would vote 1, right? And this is, as we said before, this is transitive. So for example, if you want to run a consensus on this unit, then we will just look at the DAG. So these units are voting 1, of course, because they are referencing the previous one. So of course they vote 1. This one is voting 0 because it's not referencing. The higher rounds now. This gets a bit more tricky. Now we are not asking only about whether you see the unit or not. We are asking about do you think that majority sees a unit or not? So
I'm sorry, what does it mean for a unit on the reference one to be voted 1? Do you mean that this fellow has in the previous sentence, do you mean that this fellow has published a unit that references unit U, or that this fellow has published a unit that references unit U and voted 1 of it?
No,
the voting is implicit. I mean, if
you have it in your local version of the DAG.
Okay, so voting is implicit by publishing a unit that references.
yes,
Like units vote.
yeah, you don't really like put this bit into the unit. I mean, the referencing is enough.
Okay.
So now, what do you do on the higher rounds? So when you have a unit in the higher round and it's referencing only the units with a given vote, then it votes the same. So this is referencing only units with vote 1, it votes 1. But the tricky thing is when you are referencing some units with vote 0, some units with vote 1, then you need some kind of a tiebreaker. So we put something which is called a default vote. We have a default vote for every round. In the further part of the presentation, I'm going to speak about how do we define the default vote. But basically, you either vote by the vote, unanimous vote of your parents, or you put a default vote which is defined for a given round. And now the important property here is that if at some level all the units will vote the same, then it's going to continue forever. So let's say there is some level 8 where there are only 1s. So of course at level 9, every unit will be referencing only units with 1s. So it's going to continue forever. Now the big question is, how do we prove that it will eventually reach the stage where there is an unanimous vote on a given level? Of course, it's going to deal with have something to do with the default votes. And actually, it can be proven that with such construction, adversary can stall the protocol indefinitely. And this is not surprising at all, because this is what the FLP theorem states, that if you have if you have an asynchronous network, then it is not possible to define a deterministic protocol which will have finality condition, even when there is only one adversarial node. So
just a question before that. Why do you need to get all ones on a single level?
So why do we need to get?
Basically, everybody must agree that these nodes are available.
This is it's hard to prove that we need this property, but this property definitely gives a consensus. I mean, if it happens, then definitely no zero will can be created further, right? This is definitely the property which is enough to reach the consensus. Whether some smaller property is enough, let's leave it for a moment. We don't know, but this is what we're aiming for. To have
in the previous version, there was the weaker assumption that the majority, the supermajority vote.
Yeah, there can be different constructions which are actually not relying on the unanimous voting.
But it may seem stricter condition, but in fact it's easier to analyze.
Also, even if you have one of the weaker conditions, then like a couple levels later you will get the stricter condition.
Oh, and then how do you use actually these things? Because like the standard ways, you select for the given round or whatever it is, a big vector, everybody agrees on some big vector, and then you linearize all the transactions with ones. Right?
No, these ones, like these votes are not the same as the decision, right? So now we are like making a decision about one particular unit, whether it should be 0 or 1.
For one particular.
Yes, we are voting for this unit U. So
okay.
these votes are only for the single purpose of deciding on this unit.
Okay. But then his question, what about Byzantine votes, right? Yeah. So you cannot expect that they'll have one.
Yes, of course, like as I said before, this voting, it's virtual. So Byzantine nodes may produce some units and they will reference some other units. So some votes needs to be computed. I mean, you are definitely able to compute some vote. And of course, they may try to avoid reaching consensus. They may try to game the system in such a way that it will never happen that there will be unanimous voting.
They
because
can always put a 0, for instance.
I mean, they can always try to reference such units that the 0 will appear. But what we
if they're silent, right? So
this is actually all right if they're silent.
Sure, but then it cannot be that everybody votes one, right? You just be honest.
So, but it's virtual voting, so you're assuming what their vote is going to be. And
No, that's a legitimate question with being silent. So basically,
we might know if we see enough vote. If we vote for 1, because all the units we see are 1, and we see at least 2/3 of units, and the default vote on this level is 1, then we know that everybody will see, because we see at least a supermajority of units.
Okay, so you assume that if they follow the protocol correctly,
yes. If they create any unit, it will be 1.
It will be in the, I think, next slide.
Okay.
So this is this FLT, and this is actually the argument, I think, which will answer your question. So the key observation here is that at every level, there can be only 2 types of votes. So for example, at this level, looking here, there is majority of 1s. So the units here can either reference only units with 1s, or they can reference some units with 1s, some units with 0. But it's absolutely not possible that the unit here will reference only units with both 0, because there's just not enough of them.
Yes. So
that's why you can, at every level, you can have only 1s or default votes.
Okay.
And now the adversary is.
I'm guessing that every unit references that nodes previous unit.
Yes, we do. And so now it also could happen that the adversary want to game the system in such a way that he always, as he is in control of the network delays, that he always actually makes others reference only some units with. Okay, but for example, if the default vote is 1, but he tries to make the normal vote 0, so that could happen. So that's why we need a randomness here. So what we want to do is we want to make a default vote random, and then once the normal vote is revealed only, then we reveal what is a random vote, and there is a 50% chance that it's going to be the same, and then we are good with consensus.
I'm sorry, were we assuming that in the previous round we have a supermajority of ones?
I mean, there is majority of something always, or
I was, yes, the supermajority.
can you ask a question
More
again?
than 2/3. Did you want to assume that the previous round has more than 2/3 of?
No, not at all. If there is, for example, half ones and half zeros, there will be only default votes on given round, right? So, I mean, what is impossible is to have normal votes of ones and normal votes of zeros. That's absolutely impossible. There can be only normal votes of one kind and default votes on a given round. So now what we want to do is we want to make default vote random and revealed after the normal vote is already established. Okay, so that's going to be a trick, and of course we need a random people for that purpose. So okay, how to generate randomness? As I said before, basically we can just have a private key, sign some fresh unused nonce before to generate a signature, and the signature then can be assumed to be random. The trick, of course, is here who is signing this thing, right? Well, why are you?
I'm very confused if you assume that signature is random. Would you assume about signatures? If I take a valid signature and I
you can hash the signature.
Okay. If I take a valid signature and I prevent something that makes it hash, and I spend a lot of effort to find something that will make its hash be at first be equal to 1, and this is still, then I still have a valid signature set up.
How can you check?
I don't understand the question.
How can you check with public key that this?
So if I prevent, if I take the signature scheme and prevent the text of the declaration independent before the signature, there is still a valid signature scheme. The signature doesn't look very good.
Yeah, sure, but the thing here is that the secret key is not known to anyone.
Right, so by using the
So,
Shamir secret
yeah.
sharing, this is how it's done, right?
So you will not be able to produce signatures because this secret key will not be available.
I'm not saying that I will be able to produce them, but I'm saying that the bits of the signature will there is no reason if this is just any signature scheme, there is no reason to assume that bits of the signature.
Yeah, they are not random, but they are unpredictable. So you can take the hash of this signature.
Okay, but we need a setup which gives a unique signatures. Right? This is does it solve your problem? If we have a signature scheme which gives unique signatures.
No, I can still prevent something belong and constant to every signature and declare that all my signatures need to start with this long constant, and then all of those bits are predictable.
Okay, so maybe I think there is some confusion. I'm gonna say again about this.
It's fine. I mean, but no matter what the signature scheme is, if you cannot forge signatures, okay, then hashing the signature will give you a random value under the random oracle, because you cannot guess what the signature is.
You need cooperation of many nodes to produce a signature. So it's going to be produced only once for a given nonce, and then you hash it. And okay, so using random oracle model.
So this is a statement similar to saying that there is at least a function of the security parameter bit of entropy in the signature.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, no, something is happening here.
No. You need to reset the window it's active on.
This is working. This is not working. Where is this mouse? Gaming mouse. That's all much reliable technology.
Okay, working again.
Okay. All right.
Let's see how long that lasts.
Thanks. Okay. So what you usually do is you take this private key, you split it from your secret sharing into n shares in such a way that more than n/3 shares are required to produce a valid signature. So a cooperation with at least one honest node is necessary to produce a valid signature, which means that the adversary himself is unable to construct these signatures and predict the randomness ahead of time, because the honest one will only cooperate in this endeavor of producing signature when the time is right. And the problem here is that, well, this secret sharing, someone needs to share these secrets. I mean, usually, like, someone needs to produce this secret key, and someone needs to share it among the nodes. So where do we take this dealer from? So there is also pretty old idea, but let's everyone be a dealer, and let's deal just n different keys. So what happens then is that we have some honest nodes which honestly dealt keys and honestly like removed them from their hard drives, and then like they are really unpredictable. And there are some unhonest nodes, malicious nodes, which have dealt the keys, but they still keep the private keys, and then they will be able to predict the outcomes of this particular random sources. So the simple thing you can do, you can aggregate many of this dealt random sources, sort them, and then, well, when you sort something which is predictable with at least one unpredictable thing, then of course you get unpredictable source of randomness. So what you actually ask the nodes to do, you ask every node to produce a random source, so to speak, and already declare with which other random sources he will be XORing the results. So every node commits to some random source and commits to some group of other nodes, which so the random source will be merged always from this group. And with this, you are ending up in a situation where you have a lot of unpredictable randomness. So everyone who actually produced this thing that now is able to produce a randomness, but like there is a very funny problem here, because now you have too much randomness. I mean, you do not have a consensus about which randomness would you like to use, because some of them may be available, some of them may be not available. I mean, you need a consensus on availability of each of these random sources. Yes.
Can you cancel out one of the real random sources by delaying your?
That's a very good question. Yeah, so we are using actually a commitment scheme before we were revealing the actual random source. So yes, without it, you could cancel out the honest random source by producing just sort. I mean, the same actually, by putting the same.
Yeah, you could copy, but yeah, we actually defend against.
Yeah, with some kind of a commitment scheme before revealing the actual source. But that's a good thing.
So how do you compute the XOR? What is there's some
So
to this?
no, you don't compute XOR of keys. You are.
That's what you want to do.
What you actually do is, when I publish my my shares, when I'm sending my shares of my random zones to people, I'm always also committing to the group of other random sources. So each time something will be output from my random source, it will be always XORed with the same set of outputs of other random sources. Okay. So, for example, someone is publishing. This guy, for example, he is publishing his shares, and he says that I want my outcomes to be always XORed with the outcomes of random source 1, 3, and 7, or something like this. So when you do each time you need a randomness, you actually produce a lot of them and XOR. And now there is this funny problem that okay, that's nice. We have already all random sources and unpredictable. The remaining problem is that there is no consensus on availability of these random sources. So if you want to actually do something with some randomness, So, well, from my perspective, it may look like there is random source number 1 available, but from some other honest node perspective, it may look like it was never actually constructed. So now the remaining thing is that you actually need to run a consensus script, which, well, is kind of solve the problem, but also it very much looks like a circular reasoning, because like the reason why we are even talking about random sources is that we need them for the sake of making consensus, and now to make a random source, you actually need to make a consensus on availability of something.
And to speed up
and
the
oh no, we are getting there. So actually there is one simple trick which we just solved it, and the trick is that, okay, if you want to run a consensus on random source number 2, you use random source number 2. I mean, you want to run the consensus on availability of random source 2. Then you use it as a source of randomness because it's unpredictable. And yeah, either you end up with trivial zeros because it's really unavailable. And if adversary would like to stall the consensus, he would actually need to show it to many people. So it would be they would be able to actually use this randomness. That's the like breaking the cycle argument.
And in the consensus in every round, we actually needed to use the random source.
Yes.
So if it appears as if no one has access to this random source,
then it trivially ends with zeros on the round 1 or 2.
How do we know that no one has access to this source versus no one has yet access to this source?
Okay, it may happen that the random source which was actually published ends up with 0 because it spread it too slow, and we are okay.
There is a consensus problem. We need to determine. You need to determine at which point.
So there is this property that if something on round R wasn't known to us, and we are at round 4, we know that it will be decided on 0.
Yeah, that's
Okay, thank you. This helps, and I think that I understood the answer to my question at the same time.
yeah. Basically, it means that if you are very much higher in this DAG and you still don't see it, then majority of the votes will be zeros, and the zeros will spread, and it will be quickly decided to be 0.
Also, this is also a layer of service protection in which you can just drop units that.
Yes. Okay. So that's basically it. The conclusion is that we have coded it, and some of you have seen it. It's pretty fast, so it has latency around 1 second for 30,000 transactions, when run on 128 nodes. We very much hope to scale it higher than 128, and well, asynchronous random beacon is also efficient. That's a funny conclusion. Okay, thank you. If there are any more questions, I'm happy to answer.
Do you think that the set of malicious nodes stays the same over time?
Yes, I mean, we are secure under kind of adaptive model where it starts with all honest nodes, and adversary can like corrupt nodes, but model where some node can become uncorrupted and some other may become corrupted. This, I think, I'm not sure if there is even a consensus which is secure against such a model.
But if you can like limit the corruption, say something like in every say something like the set of nodes that were corrupted at any point during the round is small enough, and I would strongly expect so, because I know that in those cases you can do funny things like rotate Shamir shells.
Okay. I haven't seen a consensus work in such a model. Have you seen them?
I don't know. It's hard to define this even, because like if things are asynchronous, then yeah, it's hard to talk about these rounds because like it's not a well-defined thing.
I mean, if you can uncorrupt everyone and corrupt all the rest within, I think it's gonna be problematic with this predicting randomness. So let's say you have some part of the network which is corrupted right now, and they are producing shares for some future randomness. And they are sending it right now, because they are corrupted, they can do whatever, they are sending them to some other nodes, when the adversary is uncorrupting them and corrupting the other nodes, and receiving the shares, producing more shares, and then he can predict randomness, right? So I don't think you can.
I'm not agree with you, because it seems to me that the limits that you have on how many previous nodes.
No, I'm pretty sure that it's impossible. So imagine that you have 4 nodes, and now node number 1 is only node number 1 is correct. Okay, so he produces his share for some future randomness, and immediately sends it to the node number 2. And before the message reaches the recipient, adversary uncorrupts node number 1 and corrupts node number 2. Then he receives the share, produces share number 2, shares both to 3, and.
But this means that during something that looks like a single round, all of 1, 2, and 3 were corrupted at some point.
Sorry, come again?
During something that is a single round.
Yes, yeah, okay. So you could try to formalize it so that you cannot corrupt and uncorrupt too fast, right?
Yes.
So there are some delays, perhaps.
Otherwise, you can just corrupt everyone just before they receive a message.
Yeah,
and
that's, that's a bit silly. So I don't know whether this model is secure against it, and I'm not sure whether anyone actually define it properly and prove something in such a model. But that's an interesting question, actually.
So you said about message complexity, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What is the bit complexity? So how many bits do you exchange? Because, for example, unit needs to refer to at least a majority of other units, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is 2/3 time logarithm of that bits.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. That's why basically I don't know if I want to scroll to the beginning of this presentation.
So actually, these numbers are communication complexity in words, let's say, not in bits, but in words. So we don't really talk about message complexity. So we don't count messages, we just count like machine words or something, exchange.
Also, all this asymptotic results, they basically work as we said at the beginning, at high transaction throughput. So when you have like n square log n transactions per round, then well, yes, you need to reference n nodes, but that doesn't matter because this is anyway
you
less than.
divide the complexity by the number of transactions, and then you get like O of 1 because it amortizes.
So for very low throughput, the actual complexity is higher, but it doesn't matter that much because well, anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so, I guess thanks for staying. I think it's not 20 minutes, but it was not only my fault.